So I've always been into hacking consoles. It's a cool way to play older games on newer hardware when that company won't let you. Nintendo. The thing is, I would need 2 of one system if I wanted to hack it. That's why my only hacked systems are this Wii and my new 3DS, because all of my legit save data for the 3DS are on my 2DS. That's where I play all my legit games. This is just for emulation, and I might remove the hack from my Wii because that's actually the first Wii, the original Wii, and I don't have a second one for that. I kind of want to get a second one just for hacking and not put it on my original Wii. I don't know why. It's just weird how I want to do it. I'd totally be down to hack the Wii U, but I just feel like I need 2 consoles for some reason. That's where the R4 comes into play, at least for the DS line of systems. It lets you play DS, NES, SNES, and Game Boy games on this, and you can also play some Sega and Atari classics. If you want to see the full list, I'll have it linked in the description below for all the consoles that this thing supports. But should you really buy this thing in 2020? What makes it so significant that would make you want to buy it in the year where most games will probably be ported to the Switch sooner or later? Time for a bit of history on this thing. The very first card, called the R4 Revolution for the Nintendo DS, was released sometime in 2007. The team behind it just called themselves Team R4 and were based in southern China. It was commonly shortened to R4DS or R4DS, but they all basically mean the same thing, and they're all just referring to this thing anyway. It was just an adapter with a micro SD card in the slot in the back of it. The R4 itself would act as an interface between the DS and the firmware on the micro SD card. An alternative operating system was then put on the micro SD card, letting you play basically any past games from the DS downwards. It can't play GameCube or Nintendo 64 games. Those are just too much for this little cartridge to handle, especially with its small micro SD card in the back. R4 cards could be used for a variety of different applications. You could turn your DS or 3DS into a portable music or movie player. R4 cards became popular very quickly and moved over to the USA and mainland Europe within its first few years. Like I mentioned, I like hacking systems, but I only really got into it about a year and a half ago, so that's about the time when I got this, around my birthday of 2019. But when I first put it into my 3DS, it had ROMs on it already, which if that happens to you, which it most likely will, where you have ROMs on here, take them off, delete them, and only put ROMs for the games you already own. Because playing games you don't own is technically illegal, because you're getting that same experience as someone that paid for it for free, I guess. When loading the SD card onto your computer, it's actually a very simple process. Each system you want to emulate has its own folder with the emulator and games in it, except for the DS games. That just has a folder called Games, where you can just drop ROMs into it and it'll show up. I assume the DS emulator is just built into the cartridge itself, but I don't know. There are also these files at the bottom in the file explorer that I assume just help the cartridge run correctly, and it's very easy to just drag and drop ROMs into the correct folders. So it's time to get into the most exciting part of this cartridge, which is playing it, and it's a really nice experience. This cartridge actually shows up as Touch Bomberman when you put it into your console, I assume to avoid the 3DS having it show up as I don't know, something that wouldn't allowed to be read. Who knows? When you boot it up, there are 3 different options. One for games, one for media, and one for just configuration. It's just an options menu where you can change the language, the skin, and much more. The main attraction here is the games, and as you'd expect, they run very well. There might be some glitches, like the fact that when I try and play the minigames in New Super Mario Bros., the ROM crashes, and you have to close out of the game. But that just might be an issue with the ROM itself. You could always just try and drag and drop a different ROM from a different place. Besides those few bugs, this thing runs those games very well. If you're talking about older Nintendo systems, then, it also runs them very well. I've heard of a few glitches, like the screen being too high up or not being able to, actually play the game. But I've heard you can just drag and drop a different emulator in there, so if something like that happens to you, just go online and find a different emulator. There are so many of those things, especially for older systems. Into the media side of things, it was just kind of weird, a weird interface. It would give you it's basically just a file explorer that you would go into the files, and you could listen to music. I mean you can. If you're watching this, you probably have a device to listen to music on, so I don't know why you'd choose to do it on your DS, but no judge. So like I said, the audio works just fine, but I could not get videos to load for the life of me. I tried to follow many different guides, but it just ended up crashing the cart for me whenever I tried to load it. It would not work. You have to get the videos into this weird format, and even when I did, the videos still wouldn't load, and they ended up just crashing the cart again. So overall, I think this thing is a great deal if you don't have a Switch and want to emulate games on an official piece of Nintendo hardware, which is basically what this is doing. Only get this thing if you're gonna use it to play ROMs or listen to music on it. Although, like I mentioned, if you're watching this, you probably have a phone or a PC that can play music for you, so I don't know why you'd want this to play music for you. So I kind of changed my mind. I think it's safe to say that you should only really get this thing for the emulation. Don't think I hate this thing though. It's a really neat thing for when it released, and I think it's a great way to have your retro games with you on the go. Although you could just go the, I guess, more difficult route, which, depending on who you are, it could be more difficult or it could be easier. You wouldn't really have to spend any money. You could just hack your 3DS, and you'd be able to play stuff like Nintendo 64 games, SNES games, NES games, right from your home menu, and you wouldn't need this at all. And thanks actually for the 1,000 views on that Nintendo 64 emulation video. I don't know how that happened. It's pretty weird. You guys are weird. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. If you like this video, click subscribe, and if you did that, click that notification bell. God, I hate myself for saying that. I'll see you guys next week. Goodbye.